of suicide, attempt of suicide, and oh, sorry, I have to. Okay, people who have attempted suicide, and also people who have ideation, suicidal ideation, especially among young people. So, and the title of my presentation, "What Keeps You Alive," is the title of my dissertation from my master's degree, and also the title of the book that I published. And I will tell you why I came to that title. Well, here is the book, the first one that
Volodymyr Popoyev has joined the meeting.
Published.
A participant has enabled.
And also
this transcript,
other books that we have been.
Open Popo.
Well, I don't know. Are you listening to a narrator? Because I'm listening to a narrator.
Yes, I will let people to fix it. I think that is the translation, online translation thing. I'm taking care of it.
All right, yeah. If I have to do anything, please let me know. Okay, so there are some books that I've been participating. The first one by myself, and the second one, it's a very interesting book that we just published, and I had the opportunity to write a chapter about logotherapy perspective in suicide prevention. That is very interesting. It's also from the University of São Paulo, and I'm sharing it with you just to show how we are gaining space, gaining room in the university here. So this second book, you have chapters about cognitive behavior therapy, about psychoanalysis, about many other approaches. And we got to have also a logotherapeutic approach on suicide prevention. I think that's very interesting. I put here the cover of the first book of Logotherapy and Existential Analysis, Proceedings of the Viktor Frankl Institute, Vienna, because the volume 2 is coming soon. So Charles and Jay Levinson, they are the editors for this second volume, and I'll have also the pleasure, the honor to have an article about suicide prevention also in this book. I have published other books as well, talking about love in logotherapy. So it's I call it psychology of love, but it has a lot fundaments in logotherapy, and one that I published this year in English, because all the others are in Portuguese, but the Heroes of Our Existence is available on Amazon in English if anybody would like to know more about the conclusions that I've came across. And I'm talking about this, about love, because it is part of the answer for that question, what keeps us alive? Well, talking about suicide, where are we today? We know we have numbers from the World Health Organization that more than 700,000 people die due to suicide every year. For every suicide, there are many more people who attempt suicide. A prior suicide attempt is an important risk factor for suicide in the general population. Suicide is the fourth leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds. In at least 17 countries, suicide reportedly was the leading cause of death for those from 15 to 34 years old. And in many other countries, it's the second main cause. So we are talking about something very serious. And when we talk about it, we know that the number of people who have ideation, suicidal ideation, is extremely high. Here in Brazil, at least, we see it in our everyday life, in our offices, in the clinical psychology, unfortunately, and also self-harm behavior. And these are things that are very linked. Here we have some numbers, the suicide rate throughout the world. So we see that unfortunately most of the countries have there about 5 to 15 people committing suicide among in a scale of 100,000 people. So this is a huge number, unfortunately, especially in those countries where it's more orange or red. It's interesting because one of the things that we come across in our research about suicide is that we see that the number of people in more poor countries is higher than in developed countries. However, we can see many cities, many countries that are very developed, that are very rich, and the numbers are also high. We have here an example in São Paulo. Pinheiros is a very developed neighborhood in the city of São Paulo, and the numbers in a certain period were very high. It's like 55. It's a very, very high number. So in Brazil today, the number is 6.1, and it in the past 10 years, the past decade, it increased while the world number had decreased. Well, I have to tell you that these numbers are before the pandemic. I don't have the numbers after the pandemic, and because there was a change after the pandemic, as we know. But one thing that I'd like to call your attention is when we talk about Vienna.
Greg has joined the
meeting.
The
city of Vienna in Austria, in the 30s, the 1930s, between the First and the Second War, it was very high, the number of suicide. It came to 73. It is a very high number. And as it approached to the Second World War, unfortunately, the numbers were very, very high, more than 200, 250. And then after the war, we can't tell because the numbers were controlled by the Nazis. So Vienna today, the numbers of Vienna today is 11. So just for us to have an idea. And also for us to have an idea of how the atmosphere, the social atmosphere affects the security, how people people see life and how people feel about life, and for us to understand better the causes of their suicidal ideation and attempts. Well, what happened also in this period? We know there was this man, Viktor Frankl, was there in Vienna, and he was working. He was becoming a doctor in the 20s. He was growing in his professional work. He started the youth centers, and let me just see. He established the service of youth counseling centers. It was for free. It was in the year 1928. And most of the complaints that we see in his writings from these young people, most of them were about suicide ideation. And of course, the frustration in the search for meaning. We know also that in the year 1933, Viktor Frankl became the head of the Women's Suicide Ward, seeing over 3,000 patients per year. So he worked there for 4 years, it's a lot of people. He has a lot of experience working with suicide. And it will give us this idea about his experience when he talks about suicide, when he talks about this topic. He has a lot of experience for that, and maybe one of the few people in the world who have ever had this amount of experience on the topic. In the 20s and 30s, it was common for anyone attempting suicide to be taken to the city's hospital for psychological evaluation. And those deemed more severe cases were transported to Steinhoff, the hospital where Viktor Frankl worked. So it's really amazing the number of people, because we know that there were 3,000 women every year that he saw. He worked in his department, but those are the ones who were transferred from the city hospitals. The number is really huge. And it's interesting for us as I was doing this research, and I came across many articles, not many, but very important articles that you will find in the references afterwards. And
Julia C. has joined the meeting.
Very interesting to see how Viktor Frankl was active in that period. And also when we see in the book writings from the youth. I have this book in Spanish. It was organized by Gabriele Wesley Franco, and I'm not sure if we have this book in English. The original is Für Schriften. It's a very interesting collection of writings by Viktor Frankl. And one of the things that I was very, very surprised and fascinated to see is that in 1927, he used to write in the newspapers of the city, and he also used pseudonym to write. And one of the names that he used was Lola Elberger. It's interesting. He was very active, and he wrote in this moment. He said the first sentence of the article in Der Abend refers to economic deficiencies as a cause of psychological crisis. However, we must contradict Softner's opinion that these alone constitute the sole cause of the psychological difficulties of youth, and that therefore they can be resolved through an improvement in external social circumstances. Certainly, we do not ignore their importance. However, we are far from considering them a panacea. So this is Viktor Frankl writing, debating about a previous article by Softner's that was saying that the psychological crises were referring to economic deficiencies. And that is very, very interesting, because we can talk about that today as well. We always see these kinds of observations when we talk about suicide. As for example, as I told, the numbers sometimes come with the highlights saying, well, the less developed countries have a higher number, but it's not because of economic factors. Of course, it contributes, but as Viktor Frankl says there in 1927, we can't consider them as a panacea. And he continues, one way or another, it is time to educate ourselves sufficiently about the psychology of young people so that we do not respond to a young person's suicide by simply taking note of the fact, or at most offering a gesture of compassion, only to immediately return to our daily activities. Well, I think these writings show us more of Viktor Frankl's activities and his commitment to do something different from the early years. And it continues. There is another article now signed by Viktor Frankl himself using his name in 1926. We clearly realize that nowadays there are few and rare occasions for young people to ask questions about their lives that seem important to them, and indeed are. A recent news report informed us that in the first 3 months of 1926, there were 20 suicides or suicide attempts in Vienna solely out of fear of punishment. A motive that, as is evident, can only be assumed in the case of young people. How many more cases will be added under the heading of unknown reasons until we come to understand the real consequences of the difficult circumstances mentioned above? Well, I think we can think about these today, nowadays, in our days. I've seen, unfortunately, so many young people committing suicide in my city, in my state, in my country, in many parts of the world. And we have to ask the same questions that Frankl was asking 100 years ago in Vienna. Are we providing them occasions for them to ask questions about their lives that seem important to them, and indeed are? I think this is one of the biggest questions that logotherapy also is contributing to psychology in every sense. A psychologist in the concentration camp. So I'm passing through the history here to tell you about my research, and that's what we were doing. Of course, in the book, we will talk about every aspect. Here, I'm just highlighting the main factors. And we know that historically, Viktor Frankl started there in the 20s, but he continued his work talking about suicide prevention also in the concentration camp as a prisoner, as we know. So in 1942, Frankl was deported to Theresienstadt, where he tried to help newcomers overcome the shock of life in Theresienstadt. Quoted from SONEC 2012. This is the main research that helped me. This article by SONEC in 2012. Just a minute, I have to. It was in my view here. So the National Socialists left no stone unturned to prevent suicides among the camp inmates, but not to prevent them. Suicide was strictly prohibited. Anyone who survived an attempt was taken to the infamous small fortress.
Has left the meeting.
And this punishment was meted out to others. Relatives were punished according to the principle of parental responsibility. Other prisoners who remained silent about a suicide instead of reporting it to the camp administration were brought to justice. This particularly affected the camp doctors, who often covered up suicides by citing heart failure as the cause of death. So this is one thing that we can, just for us to understand better the situation in the concentration camp. So Viktor Frankl was helping them to not commit suicide. And the situation in the concentration camp was that if somebody committed suicide, they not just the person would be dead, of course, but also her parents and everybody who was near them, and it was a very difficult situation for everybody, including the doctors. The biography reveals that Frankl developed a sort of suicide news service that would immediately report any signs of suicidal thoughts or intentions to him. He would then reach out to the potential suicide and attempt to dissuade them. It was also in Sonek's article. It's amazing when we see all of these. It's really impressive. When the former inmate, so this is a quote from Man's Search for Meaning, and the former inmate 119, 104 tends to describe now what he experienced as a psychologist in the concentration camp. It is necessary to note beforehand that naturally he did not function there as a psychologist, not even as a physician, except during the last few weeks. This detail is important to emphasize because the focus should not be on showcasing his personal way of life, but on how precisely the common prisoner experienced life in the concentration camp. And this is to say that, well, he didn't have the role of a psychologist there. He was helping people because it was the right thing to do, and because of the principles that he had. In the face of a hopeless situation with the danger of death lurking every day, every hour, and every minute, and with the proximity of death for others, for the majority, it was natural that almost everyone would contemplate suicide, even if only for a moment. Well, I highlighted this because part of my work is to study what happened, but also to put it in front of our situation nowadays. What is happening nowadays? And I'd like to invite you to think with me about these aspects. So, hopeless situation.
Session host has joined the meeting.
We know that in Brazil,
for
example,
has left the meeting.
We know that in Brazil, for example, in the years from the year 2003 to 2000, from the year 2013 to 2020, when the numbers of suicides increased, we know that Brazil was in a huge crisis in how it somehow affected people. Brazil was divided. There was polarization. There was discussions. There were families fighting and friends fighting because of political reasons. And we can't put ourselves in the mind of young people that they are growing up in an atmosphere that is not secure, that is not safe, that's not stable. And we know that it sometimes can be, as Viktor Frankl is saying here, in a hopeless situation, the danger of death. Well, you see people giving up their lives near you. You see people losing the meaning of life near you. You see drug addiction increasing. You see the negative, tragic triad happening. Many people around you. So that's what Viktor Frankl was saying about the concentration camp. And you also see people dying. So with the proximity of death for others. And also in this period in Brazil, we saw the increasing also in the number of murdering in many states. Violence increased also in Brazil. And I'm talking about this period in Brazil, but we can be talking about this everywhere in our world, and especially now when we have at least two big wars happening in our world, and young people especially seeing and watching them every day, it is not a good thing, and it can be something that can affect their search for meaning, their meaning in life, and it can also influence them to have suicidal ideation. Well, it's worth emphasizing the fact that Frankl made this vow not to give in on the first night, because he knew he would face situations where he himself would feel the urge to do so. In this way, he promised to himself establishes an internal law that will guide his own will, strengthening his consciousness and illuminating the path to making the decisions that will need to be made in the months and years ahead. So now we are already talking about how to prevent suicide. And when we see people coming to our offices with suicidal ideation, helping them to find this conscience where they can promise to themselves. They can also, as Viktor Frankl, make this vow that when bad situations and worse situations come to mind, they will not break this vow. It helped Viktor Frankl in that situation as well. So what is the question that we have to ask? Is it that, why do people want to die? This is a fair question. And I think that most of the works that we see about suicide, most of the articles that we see in books that we see about suicide, we go to this question: why do people want to die? Is it because they are poor? Is it because they were born in a bad family, in an unstructured family? Well, why is it that they want to die? It's a fair question. We should ask this question. But I don't think this is the best question for us to ask. Why don't people want to live? Well, this is it's almost the same question, but it has another perspective. Is it that life among us is not good? Is it that these people would like to live in another situation? Of course, we always see people trying to fantasize that they would like to live in another country, in other places, in other era. But is it so? Why don't people want to live? But the question that came to me is, instead of looking for the reasons that people want to die or they don't want to live, let's work on what keeps them alive. Let's work on what can we do to help them, not just to solve the reasons that they think they don't want to live, but also give them what reasons for them to be able to be alive, and they know it, they have it. And this question came out because like almost 100% of the patients that I had during these 16 years that had attempted suicide, I always asked them, and it's a huge number of people that I saw that attempted suicide. I asked them, why didn't you try again? What made you not try again? And most of them, almost 100%, would answer, well, because I thought of my mother, well, because I thought of my son, well, because I thought of my friend, oh, because I thought of my cat, my dog, because I thought of somebody. So it's fair to say that the relationship that these people have with somebody, not just the relationship in a way that these people love them, but in a way that they could access their self-transcendence. They could think of somebody other than themselves. They could think of somebody who they loved somehow. And because I love my mother, I don't want to see her suffering, because I wasn't thinking about her when I was attempting to commit suicide. I was thinking about all the things that were a burden to me, and it's a real suffering. And we can go and see all the work that Viktor Frankl, all the writings, all the situations that he wrote about helping people not to commit suicide. We will see exactly that. When in the concentration camp, he saw the people, he was asking them, well, is there a reason for you to keep alive, that you can maybe think, well, maybe if the war is over, what are you going to do in the future? So he was always asking and helping people to connect with the reasons that they can have to live, the meaning that life can bring to them. So going on, existential analysis logotherapy was referred to as the psychology of height, because it endorsed the idea that people could transcend natural processes and focus on the future aspects of their lives, especially on the meaning that life urges us to fulfill. On the other hand, Tweedale states, difficult though it may be, the competent patient is the only one qualified and authorized to make decisions about their best interests. Frankl, and this is a quote by Ewald Quist and Lutzen, he will say, Frankl does not follow this line of thought. As a survivor of 4 concentration camps, he knows that humans are capable of resisting and facing even the worst conditions through self-transcendence, disconnecting at least momentarily from the situation. So we know, and we have these foundations in logotherapy, we see the human being in a different way. For some approaches, for some theories, maybe we will say, well, the person wants to die, let's let them die because they are the only ones responsible for themselves. But we are here seeing that Viktor Frankl saw it in a different way, and he also lived these experiences in his work. We are of the opinion that we must save whoever we can. If fate or providence has placed a patient in our hands, we renounce playing with destiny and do not consider it the doctor's task to decide whether to save or not. So this is a principle. We fight for life. We do everything that we can to save these people. In 1995, Frankl wrote in his memoirs, my assistant, Dr. Rappaport, protested that I was trying to save people who had attempted suicide. Then came the day when Dr. Rappaport herself received an order to appear for deportation. She then attempted suicide, was admitted to my department and brought back to life by me, and later she was deported. Well, that's the conviction of Viktor Frankl. Even the person who was against him, his behavior to save suicidal people who attempted suicide, even this doctor was saved by him when she attempted suicide. And we can think about that as a position, as how can we how can we behave ourselves in our professional and in the discussions that we have with our colleagues about the topic as well. So, what is the role of the psychologist? So we have to know the history, the historical aspects and cultural factors regarding suicide. We know that there are a lot of things that we have to understand about suicide. There are some disorders that also influence people to be suicidal. We have to know that. We have to really be sure if the main reason is is frustration, is a noetic reason, is a noogenic reason. We have to understand if it is really the case. Tranquility, not being afraid, having no apprehension, not entering the personal hell of the other person, listening, not relying too heavily on techniques, being open to listen and assess. Well, there is one situation, I'll try to be very brief, that last year I had the opportunity to receive a boy, a young man here. He was 18 years old, and he was brought by his family because he attempted suicide. And what happened was a very beautiful thing about his family. Everybody flew. His sister, who was in another state, flew back home to be with him, and nobody left him alone any second of the day because they were afraid he tried to commit suicide again. And one day, he was coming for the sessions with his families, and one day he came. I get emotional every time I remember, and every time I talk about this. He came with 5 friends. It was beautiful to see in the corridor of my office, 5 friends bringing him with a lot of love, taking care of him. It was beautiful. But what happened was that he was having a lot of trouble with himself. His parents were separated. It was a difficult time for him. There were a lot of aspects that I will not mention, but the thing is that throughout the weeks, he became more aware of himself. He could decide for his life, but the family wouldn't leave him alone, and it was becoming a problem because he was a young man and he wanted to have his privacy. And I had to tell the family, well, now you can let him go out by himself. And it is a very difficult decision for the psychologist. Well, if I tell this to his family, and if he kills himself, they are going to kill me. So this is a very big responsibility. But I was sure that at this moment, I had to commit myself with himself, because the way for him to overcome his problems was also for him to have the responsibility of his life. And I told him, he was afraid. He was, I don't know if I can trust myself. I said, I trust yourself. You can. Yes, you can. You were able to do it.
Schreiber has left the meeting.
You were doing a lot of things. He was doing a lot of things that, of course, made me be sure of what I was saying. And so what happened is that in the end, he could go to college. He's studying in the college. He's living by himself for more than 9 months. He's very happy. He's doing everything that he needs to be doing there. This is one of the things that we should not be afraid, and we also should be able to be listening. I know I'm going out of time here. I will pass some of the slides, and there are a lot of things that I think these slides are available for you. You will be able to see them and read them, and if you have any other questions, you will be able to address me. I go here to the end of my of them. There are a lot of things here. They're very, very interesting, especially when Viktor Frankl talks about the ultimate responsibility for everyone's life. It's beautiful. It's nice. And in the book, I will talk about 2 clinical cases, not this one that I talked to you today, but other people that I saw, other young people that I saw in the University of São Paulo during the pandemic, especially. And one of them was, I call her Anne here. Of course, it's not her name. And one of the things that shocked me was this sentence that she said that humanity should be annihilated. So it's interesting. And he said, the biggest plague is the human being. I am in favor of voluntary extinction. I feel mutual hatred towards all human beings. It's a bad thing as a whole, but I'm not in favor of suffering, wars, or viruses. I think that a comet could fall and end everything, or humanity would no longer have children. So this is the feeling that this young lady was having when she started the logotherapy, and it was a process. It was good. She's doing well. There are a lot of things to tell about that, to talk about that, but also to tell you the feelings that we can correlate with what Viktor Frankl was writing 100 years ago in Vienna. These things are happening nowadays. These are the types of ideas. And she told me there are groups online that are for these kind of human extinction. So how it influences and how this is part of what is happening with these people. The other one that I call Mari, she said, I wanted to have another personality. And here we are talking about a Black girl in the university who is suffering also
Bernadette has left the meeting.
For the prejudices and racism and other types of problems herself.
Élison,
okay.
If you can finalize, conclude.
All right.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. This is the final one. This is the 4 things that I think that are that I came across as a conclusion of the work with suicidal people with suicidal ideation: differentiated welcome, an existential encounter, to listen to the voice of conscience, help our patients to listen to the voice of conscience, expansion of the worldview, and calibration of tension.
Julia C. has left the meeting.
This is part of the conclusion. Well, here are the references. Here are the contact information. Thank you very much.
I think, thank you so much,
Élison. Sharing is paused.
Before you leave, please complete the survey. And I think we have lunch, so we are lucky if few questions can be asked. I think Élison can answer them. Let's cheat from the time.
Emda Osmond is the co-host now.
I'm going to have to step out because we have a lunch session actually going on, but I just want to apologize. They're trying to figure out why every time someone enters or leaves.
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies.
We couldn't fix it.
No problem. No problem. It was a pleasure to be here with you all.
Dida have a question, I guess.
No, I did not.
Okay. So, okay.
Hi, Élison. I would like to know. I would like to know if there is a lunch meeting that you can join.
Yes, there is a lunch meeting. So there are discussion groups. So you can join one of the discussion groups.
Oh, I didn't.
Any other questions to Élison? Okay, then let us thank you, Élison.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope to collaborate. Thanks.
Yeah, great.